They mistook the silence for shattering. The way you pulled away, the way you stopped explaining, the way you vanished like smoke before they could decide what part of you to cage next. They assumed it was a breakdown, that the weight of the games, the betrayals, the silent punishments had finally cracked you into pieces. What they never expected, what they never could expect, is that you were not crumbling. You were calculating. That silence wasn't collapse. It was calibration. A pause. A reset. A cold, sacred inhalation before the next incarnation. Because you weren't built to break. You were built to evolve. And the pause, that was the cocoon they thought was a grave. They thought the version of you they saw last, the tired one, the aching one, the one who bent until bones creaked, was your final form. And so, they made their exit. They closed the door with the kind of theatrical finality only the arrogant can perform. They needed to feel like they were leaving a ruin. But you didn't fall. You froze the scene, mid-frame, mid-breath. You sat in the wreckage, not to mourn, but to study. You counted the fragments. You named the patterns. You observed the blueprint of what they thought they built in you, and then you burned it. Every narrative, every dependency, every emotional anchor they thought would keep you chained. You paused, yes, but the pause was not weakness. It was warfare. During that pause, you rewired. Quietly, alone, without ceremony. You didn't post your healing. You didn't perform your comeback. You buried yourself deep into the bones of what went wrong, and you learned. You learned how you handed over your voice in small, polite increments, how you tolerated erosion disguised as compromise, how you mistranslated manipulation as misunderstanding. And with every realization, you rebuilt, not to resemble who you were, but to become someone they would never understand again. Because this time, you weren't healing to return. You were healing to rise. And when they look again, if they ever do, they won't recognize a single piece of the architecture they once lived inside. You didn't beg. You didn't explain the distance. You didn't try to make them see what they were too blind to perceive. You let their exit echo. Let their silence stretch. Let their story unfold without your participation. And in that withdrawal, you remembered how quiet your power had always been. You remembered that you were never meant to fit in rooms that demanded your shrinking, that your softness was meant for depth, not for manipulation. And when you finally stood again, you didn't rise with fury. You rose with fortress. You became the silence that no longer needed to be understood. They never came looking during the pause, and that was the point. You didn't want apologies. You wanted evidence, change, clarity, something real. But all you got was absence laced with guiltless distance. So you made peace with that. You made peace with the fact that some people only love the version of you that makes them feel powerful. That the moment you need depth, they choose distance. That the moment you stop performing your hurt in ways they can dismiss, they step away and call it self-preservation. So, you stopped performing. You stopped inviting them to a conversation where they only ever rehearsed their lines. And when the pause ended, your guest list did too. The reconstruction was brutal. Not because you missed them, but because you had to face all the parts of you that let them in to begin with. You weren't just rebuilding without them. You were rebuilding without the weakness that attracted them, without the gaps that let their poison drip in like honey. You poured concrete into those cracks, reinforced every wall. And this time, you didn't decorate your soul with apologies. You armed it with standards, with silence, with boundaries sharp enough to draw blood. You learned to love without bargaining, to speak without explaining, to leave without guilt. And the version of you that rose from that reconstruction, cold, calm, complete. They reach for you now in subtle ways, indirect, tentative, like someone tiptoeing into a museum they once tried to vandalize. But the old doors no longer exist. You replace them with gates, heavy ones, gates that don't open to familiarity, gates that require honor. And that's what they lack. See, they still think they can appeal to who you used to be. But you've buried that version deep beneath the foundation of your rebirth. You didn't evolve for their approval. You evolved because their approval was never the currency you should have been trading in the first place. You became your own architect, your own witness. You no longer outsource your self-worth to those who mistook it for a stage. You no longer crave conversations that leave you bleeding. You built a sanctuary in the space they left behind. And now that space is yours. All yours. Unshared, unapologetic, unshakable. They declared the ending as if they held the pen, as if their voice was the final punctuation in your story. It's over, they said, like executioners mistaking themselves for authors. They wanted the sound of finality to rattle through your bones, wanted their decision to echo louder than your potential. But they didn't understand that you are not built on permission. You don't function on closure. You regenerate in ruins. You rise, not because the stage is set, but because you are the storm. And when they threw that phrase in your face, expecting collapse, what they created instead was ignition. You didn't scream. You didn't chase. You smiled, not out of joy, but recognition. The same way a lion does when the cage door swings open. It's over, they said, and you whispered, watch me. They underestimated the machinery of your mind. They saw the surface. You know, the calm one, the soft-spoken one, the forgiving one. They never accounted for the psychological engine underneath. The part of you that doesn't forget patterns. The part that calculates while they perform. The part that files away every betrayal like ammunition in a hidden vault. See? When someone tries to end you and you survive, you don't just heal. You evolve. Your silence becomes symphonic. Your scars become maps. And your resolve becomes unreadable. You don't explain anymore. You build. Quietly. Unpredictably. And when they finally look up to see if you're still crawling, they find themselves staring at a silhouette walking through fire with eyes that no longer blink. There's a cold beauty in being counted out. It removes the distractions. It kills the noise. Their doubt becomes the perfect filter. You now know who can't stomach your strength, who preferred you confused, who only loved the version of you that needed them to believe. And when they said it was over, what they really meant was, I can't control what you're becoming. So they cut the rope, thinking you'd fall. But people like you don't fall. You descend, on purpose, into the underworld of self-discovery, into the furnace of reinvention, into the long, lonely process of reclaiming your power without needing anyone to clap while you do it. And when you re-emerge, there's no announcement, just impact. They never saw the kind of strength that grows in exile, the kind that's built from betrayal, the kind that doesn't flinch anymore when something breaks. It redesigns the entire foundation. You didn't need their version of together. You needed solitude, discipline, failure, and truth. They thought the end of connection meant the end of momentum, but they forgot. For people like you, solitude is not a sentence. It's a laboratory. You study in silence. You resurrect in silence. And then you return, not as a continuation of the past, but as a disruption. You come back sharper, stronger, louder in your silence than they've ever been in their noise. What they called closure, you turned into combustion. What they thought was rejection, you rewired into redirection. You don't accept loss the way others do, because you've died before. Maybe not physically, but emotionally, spiritually, psychologically. And each time, you built new skin, new sight, new systems. So now when someone tries to close the book, you thank them for the punctuation, because it gave you space to start the next chapter without dead weight on your back. They gave you the break they thought would destroy you, never realizing the pause became your blueprint for domination. They said it's over, but they didn't see the smirk behind your stillness. They didn't see that you weren't breaking down. You were stepping back, like a general walking through the wreckage of a field, not to mourn, but to plan. You don't respond to endings with emotion. You respond with execution. And your kind of revenge isn't fire. It's evolution. You don't want to prove them wrong. You want to become so unrecognizable that even their apology would feel misdirected. You want to make the old versions of yourself proud, the ones that stayed too long, gave too much, and asked too little. Because this time you're not fighting for love, you're fighting for legacy. They still tell the story with your name on their tongue, framed through the lens of ego and omission. They say you gave up. They say you disappeared. But they don't mention the silence they forced, the lines they crossed, the versions of you they buried. And that's fine. Let them lie. Let them act like they walked away from a war they started. You don't argue with those who need to distort the truth to survive their own shame. You let your success be the ghost that haunts them. The quiet realization that the best thing they ever fumbled was someone who didn't need to threaten, only transform. They thought you'd shrink, but you switched dimensions. You left the arena they built and built a cathedral in the mountains of your own solitude. Now, your voice carries differently. Your movement echoes.